Atlanta-Philadelphia has to be the most anticipated game this week for a lot of different reasons. Number one, Atlanta is riding on huge momentum for their win against the Rams. This is the first time in history that the number one seed in the postseason is the underdog. A lot of other reasons is, can Philadelphia pull this off without Carson Wentz? And I saw the last 3 games that Philly played, and to me, the problem was not Nick Foles. I saw a lot of flaws in the defense. Forget the front 7 for a minute. I'm talking the secondary. I thought the fact that you had a lot of high-scoring games in the last 5 games of the season. The Raiders shouldn't even been in that game on Christmas Day to begin with. I don't count the Dallas game, but it's still points. The Philadelphia defense has given up 104 points in their final 5 games of the season. You let Eli Manning throw 3 touchdowns on you in the Giant game. You obviously lost a horrific game in Seattle. The Rams game, obviously they put up 35 points. The Raiders shouldn't even put 10 points on the board on Christmas Day. So I think in the last 4, maybe 3 games, 5 I'm going to say 5 games, there are a lot more flaws on the defense than you think. Matt Ryan enters this game as the 3rd highest rated postseason passer in the game's history, posting a 70.7 completion percentage, 10.1 yards per attempt, and a 16-3 touchdown to interception ratio. Nick Foles' numbers in relief of Carson Wentz, he is last in completion percentage, yards per attempt, and passing rating among the 12 postseason quarterbacks. Now, it's hard to judge Nick Foles after a couple of games, so I'm not going to. But I do think their defense concerns me going into this playoff game. Excluding the front 7, the secondary worries me because of how they played in the last 5 games of the season. As much as I say that, I think Nick Foles has a target on his back this afternoon. He has a lot of people doubting him, saying he can't do it. I believe he has all the talent to keep Philly in this game. His play should not go unnoticed. And again, I've said this to a lot of people who are telling me, why are you judging Philadelphia because Nick Foles is the quarterback? He's fine. And I tell them, every concern I have, none of them is about Nick Foles. None of them. Do I think that there's a lot of pressure on him today? Absolutely, because now we get into the storyline of, can Philadelphia do this without Carson Wentz? Because with Carson Wentz, I probably would have picked them to go farther. With Carson Wentz, they are definitely a favorite to play in Minnesota in February. So now the storyline comes back into play as to, can Nick Foles get the job done? Can he redeem himself from that awful postseason loss a few years ago against New Orleans at home in the wild card round? Can he redeem himself? Can he finally get his first postseason win? So I definitely think Nick Foles has a lot riding on this game. I definitely think he's a huge player to watch. I definitely think he has a lot of pressure on him. And I definitely think he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder. I do. But none of the concerns for Philadelphia that I have are about Nick Foles. It's mainly about the defense. Yes, I think the front 7 is going to give Atlanta's running game some problems. I think Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman are going to have a tough game in Philly this afternoon. I think the cold is going to play in Philadelphia's advantage. Obviously, last week, this game was supposed to take place in 50-degree weather. Now the temperature is dropping, so obviously that goes into favor of Philadelphia. The crowd is going to be a big factor in this game with Philadelphia in the playoffs. I definitely think Philly has that advantage, but that defense concerns me a lot. Excluding the front 7, which I think is one of the best in the NFL, maybe the best in the NFL, their secondary concerns me, especially with guys like Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, guys like Matt Ryan throwing up there into the secondary. It concerns me a lot, especially with the way that they played in the last 5 games, the amount of points that they've given up in the last 5 games, the fact that they had a week off, they didn't play last week, and Atlanta dominated the Rams from start to finish. I think Atlanta has a lot of momentum in this game. I think they have a right to be favored in this game. They have a well-balanced offense. Their defense stepped up last week like we haven't seen all season. Matt Ryan stepped up big time. Julio Jones was in on a lot of crucial plays. Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman were reborn in the second half. And I think they're going to take that momentum into Philadelphia this afternoon. I think the Philly defense definitely needs to step up and have their best game all year, because you stop and think about it. The last 5 games that they played, again, excluding the front 7, I didn't think their secondary played well at all. At all. You can make the case for the Oakland game because it was a low-scoring game. Obviously, the Dallas game didn't matter because they were resting starters and all that. And I don't have a problem with Doug Peterson sitting his starters in Week 17, but I do think that could play into a factor this afternoon. I do. The fact that that defense has had problems in really the twilight of the regular season, I definitely think when it comes to that front seven, they're going to shut down the Falcons in some ways. I think you're going to see Fletcher Cox make a difference in that front seven. The Eagles, they finished the top of the league in run defense, ranked in the top 5 in points per game, total defense, third down percentage. It is arguable, like I mentioned before, their front seven is the best in the league. But Atlanta is going to find other ways to execute and get points on the board. And if that secondary plays the way they did in the last 5 games of the season, all Matt Ryan's got to do is just air the ball downfield. That's all he's got to do. To me, one of the big things here with Nick Foles is his play, like I mentioned before, cannot go unnoticed. He beat the Rams in a game he had to come in relief for Carson Wentz for. They were down when he came in and he won the game. He threw 4 touchdowns against the Giants. Listen, I know the Giants defense gave up in the preseason, but 4 touchdowns is no easy mark either. Beat the Raiders at home. All right, Nick Foles, you got to remember, in that Rams game, Nick Foles had to win that game for them to clinch the division. He did that. Nick Foles had to win a few more games down the line to clinch home field advantage. He did. So Nick Foles' play should not go unnoticed. I think he's going to have a good game today. I think he's going to keep the Eagles in this thing. This game is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think. And again, this is like last week. A lot of people are picking Atlanta. A lot of people are picking Philadelphia. A lot of people are picking Atlanta to smack Philadelphia across the state of Pennsylvania. A lot of people are picking the opposite. And a lot of people, like myself, are picking a closer game than you can imagine today. To me, a key matchup, Falcons O-line versus Philly front seven. The O-line has had some positives, especially last week against the Rams, but that front seven is the best in the league, and I think you're going to see a lot of that today. So for Atlanta to be consistent, for Atlanta to win this game, for Atlanta to make noise, they have to do this with their passing game. Matt Ryan needs to be consistent. He needs to be mobile. Julio Jones needs to find ways to make himself open. Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman need to find other ways to get involved in the passing game. I think the run game is going to get shut down quick. I truly think this is going to be a tough game for both teams. I do. I think this is going to be the toughest game this weekend besides Minnesota and New Orleans, because that's a tough one. This is the toughest game. I think the NFC is tough, regardless. All year long, we've said how much better the NFC is in compared to the AFC, and you're going to see that this weekend. You have an Atlanta-Philly matchup that could go either way, a Minnesota-New Orleans matchup that could go either way, and in my opinion, is going to be the best game of the weekend. And then on the other side, you have an AFC where New England has been at the epicenter of drama for the last 2 weeks, and a lot of people are going to watch tonight to see if that actually comes into play against the Titans, who pulled off a miracle win against the Chiefs last week. And then on the other side of it, you have a Jacksonville-Pittsburgh matchup where really it's going to be decided on if Blake Bortles remembers how to play football this week. And if he does, it's going to be a closer game than people think, because that defense is going to give Ben Roethlisberger trouble. They're going to give Le'Veon Bell trouble. They're going to give Antonio Brown trouble. They're going to make Mike Tomlin earn this win. But if Blake Bortles forgets how to play football, and I'm betting my money that he does, this game's going to be a snooze fest like the Bills game was last week. All year long, the NFC has been 10 times better than the AFC, and you're going to see that this weekend. Atlanta, Philadelphia, big game, could go either way. Minnesota, New Orleans, big game, could go either way. And in my opinion, this Atlanta-Philadelphia matchup, the most anticipated game all week, but the Minnesota-New Orleans game, the biggest game all week. I think Atlanta and Philadelphia has all the tools in the world to be a phenomenal game today. Again, Atlanta is riding on momentum. They played last week. Philadelphia is coming off the bye. Philadelphia has the best front seven in the league. But the Falcons, you don't mess with a hot streak. They have found ways to win games over the last 5 weeks. They found a way to beat the Rams in front of 74,000 people last week. They found a way to squeak their way into the playoffs. Matt Ryan finds ways to win. Julio Jones finds ways to win. Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, Dan Quinn, the head coach, find ways to win. And the other thing that comes into play here, experience. The defending NFC champion Atlanta Falcons march into a stadium to play a team with just about zero playoff experience. I was the one that said last week I didn't think experience was going to play in a factor with the Rams. I thought they were the more complete team. I thought they had the better head coach. I thought they had the better season. I do think experience will come into play this time. I do. because Atlanta proved that when the lights are on bright and they're in hostile territory, they can play just as brutal as any team in the NFC. And I think you're going to see that again today. I don't think they're going to be as affected as you think by the crowd noise. I don't think they're going to be as affected as you think by the weather. I think they're going to come into this game. They have a game plan. They have a mindset. They have a plan. And they are going to execute. On the other side, I think Philadelphia has a game plan, and they're going to execute. I think both teams have a story here to tell that is going to shape up to be a phenomenal divisional round game. I think Nick Foles is going to have a good game. I think he's going to make huge plays. I think he's going to be able to do a lot to keep Philly in this game. I think the front seven is going to shut down Atlanta's run game. I think Philly's front seven is going to give Matt Ryan trouble if he can't get the ball out quick, and especially if he's got to run out of the pocket to make plays. Stop and think for a second. After all the facts I just gave you, after all the stats I just gave you, this game has all the tools in the world to be talked about first thing Monday morning, because this is going to be a good game. And when it comes right down to it, Atlanta, Philadelphia, it's a big game. Defending NFC champions. It's hard to judge a quarterback after only playing a couple of games. I believe, honestly, there are more problems with just Carson Wentz not being in this game. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the secondary and the Philadelphia defense. They have given up 104 points in their final 5 games of the season. 104 points. As the number 1 seed, they have played in their last 5 games, I believe, 3 huge high-scoring games. The Seattle game, the LA game, and the one that got me, and we talked about it a few weeks ago, the one that got me and convinced me that Philly wasn't going to do much in the postseason was the Giants game, because they went into MetLife. I don't want to hear about a divisional game against a team in your division. Yes, I understand that's always tough, but you were playing a Giants team that had given up by week 3. You were playing a defense that didn't want to be there. There were a lot of people even speculating that Eli Manning was about to give up. Eli Manning went out there and threw 3 touchdowns against the Philadelphia defense. I don't care if it was at MetLife. I don't care if it was an NFC East division game. I don't care. If you're the number 1 seed and you have the best defense in the league, and you have a backup quarterback that can get the job done, which he did. He threw 4 touchdowns. Again, that game was not to blame on Nick Foles. That was all on the Philadelphia defense. Yes, they shut down the Oakland Raiders, but that game was 10-10 going into the 4th quarter. It was a snooze fest. Nick Foles couldn't do anything with the ball. Oakland was left in it at the 4th quarter. I don't count the Dallas game because everybody was benched, but what I'm trying to say here is over the last couple of games of the season, Philadelphia and their secondary has shown a couple of things. They're rusty. They're going to need a huge game today to get the job done. And more importantly than that, Matt Ryan and Dan Quinn already know that the run game is probably not going to work today. You have to find ways for Freeman and Coleman to get involved elsewhere. By the passing game, short passes, screen passes, fade routes, you name it, that's how they get involved. You have to find ways to get Julio Jones involved. If he's able to take apart that secondary by himself, it's going to be a long day for Philly. Now, obviously, Philadelphia has some weapons as well, obviously. I think their defense is much better than Atlanta's, which gives Nick Foles a chance to make plays down the field, to challenge Atlanta's secondary a little bit, and I think he will do that. I think you look at a guy like Nelson Aguilar, who I think had a pretty good year this year. I think he has every opportunity to make plays down the field. I think LeGarrette Blount will be able to make plays, whether that's by passing or by running the ball. I think he has all the tools in the world to get the job done as well. Stop and think about it. It's going to be a good game. It's going to be a dogfight in Philadelphia later on today, just like we all want. I think Atlanta-Philadelphia has all the tools to be a phenomenal game later on today. I'll be watching it. I know my 2 friends, one is a Philly, they're both brothers. One is a Philadelphia Eagles fan, one's an Atlanta Falcons fan. I can only imagine the fistfights that are going to go on in that house later today. And if you're both listening, have fun and be safe later. It's going to be a good game from start to finish. I truly believe that. I think Atlanta has a lot of momentum from last week. Philadelphia is the number 1 seed. You can't sleep on that. I think Nick Foles won't be the problem if it comes down to mistakes later on in the game. I think he's played well enough to show that he can get the job done. I think it's going to come down to that Philadelphia secondary, and if they can't execute against guys like Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, they are in big, big trouble.